All right. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Late Show. This is your host, Young Brando, live from Los Angeles. We are back with some watch talk and everything else that goes with the show, of course. We're going to talk about Flyback Chronographs tonight. We're going to talk about the Carrera 60th anniversary. To honor that, Hodinky just came out with a reference points article and video, which was really informative. So if you have not watched it yet, I highly recommend that you go and watch it. Towards the end, Ben Clymer and Nick Bibak had some observations about the collectors scene and the types of collectors that populate that scene at this point in time, which I found really interesting, really insightful. So we'll watch that together, and I will offer some commentary. And in fact, that's how we will start. You remember I had presented on the 60th anniversary Carrera before. Um, which has already been sold out, but we can take a quick look at that, which is a very, very nice watch. Let's do it. All right, so let's pull up the reference points from Hodinky. I was going to say Revolution. They also have an interesting interview with the same person, Nick Bibak, who is the heritage director at Tag Heuer. That was also a very informative interview, but I have to be honest. I love reference points as a series in Hodinky. It's one of the first um, sorts of videos and really reference articles that they started putting together, and that really uh, got me into that outlet, that really made me respect them. And I'm glad it is a tradition they keep going, and it really represents for me a very strong return to form by Ben Clymer as well, since this was an interview he conducted and a reference points article that he penned. Of course, I'm not gonna cry too much about how Hoya happens to be an LVMH brand, and how you know how Hodinky basically is owned by LVMH. Now, that's a question we'll sideline after this short disclaimer, so you can kind of see why there was an extra encouragement. There was a little bit of an extra motivation on the part of Hodinky to actually do a reference points work on the Carrera in its 60th anniversary. But let's listen to that segment where Ben Clymer is talking about how um, even though Carrera is one of the legendary chronographs that is in fact celebrating its 60th anniversary, it is somewhat neglected, right? It's not the first name that comes to mind. It's not even the first chronograph that Tag Heuer came up with, right? Heuer, which was what the brand was called at the time, and that would be the only name associated with the maker until 1985, had in 1962 come out with Autavia, which is a chronograph that we will touch upon a little later, which combines, of course, the two segments in which chronographs as tool watches, as instruments, were really important: the automotive industry and the aviation industry, thus Altavia. Carrera was Jack Heuer's brainchild. He literally came up with it. He literally created it after the Pan American race that was called Carrera Panamericana, and that was like a 3,000-mile run from one end of Mexico to the other. So, in fact, it was a name that Heuer used before Porsche, and that's an interesting side note to history, of course. So Ben Clymer is going to say a few things here about why Carrera should be mentioned in the same sentence as the Rolex Daytona, with which it shares its birth year, with, of course, the Omega Speedmaster, with, of course, the Breitling Navitimer, with the Zenith El Primero, with the Breguet Type 20. Let's go.
Eloquently, like, this is the purest connection to motorsport of any. The manually wound stuff is super compelling. The gold stuff, for sure. I mean, as you said very, very eloquently, like, this is the purest connection to motorsport of any watch that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
The Carrera, in many ways, is kind of the most iconic sports watch that people don't talk about as much as they should.
Yeah, I think you really hit on a note there that I often say to collectors, for me, in the contemporary modern era of watch collecting, we've kind of had three phases. Throughout the 1990s, we had what I call the scholarly collector. You know, it was your granddad with his painted pocket watches, you know, sitting there smoking his pipe with his magnifying glass in the evening, looking at them.
It's a little exaggerated. And of course, as with any observation on this scale, it has a lot of generalization, but I think what Nick Bebuk is saying here is very important, right? So he's saying for modern collectors, we had three different types, right? He says the scholarly collector, you know, who was perhaps collecting pocket watches and would examine them, would contemplate them in his study, you know, with a loop or something of that sort, or with a monocle, I guess, since he was talking about grandfathers and smoking pipes and such. Fascinating stuff. But I think, you know, unless we stick to that periodization, I think that's still a category of collector that we still have in the community, right? There are a lot of people whose collections have this sort of very broad scope. They may or may not have a focus, but in either case, these kinds of collectors, what Nick here calls the scholarly collectors, are very thoughtful about choices they make, and they can in fact account for these choices, right? And a great example of that sort of collector is, of course, Gary Getz, who writes for the Collector's Corner at Quill and Pad, right? Every time he gets a new piece, he actually pens an article about it there. And sometimes he also simply dips into his collection and presents a certain watch in the same detailed, thoughtful, and scholarly manner. Same thing can be said about someone like Charlie Dunn, whom we hosted on this channel, whom I hosted, I should say, on this channel. And even though, of course, he works now as part of the important vintage watch dealer operating out of Palm Beach, Florida, Wind Vintage with Eric Wind. You can see the same detail to attention and the same thoughtfulness that guides every single piece he writes. And I do want to share. Hi, Basil. Like your new logo, man. That's very nice. Let me also share the conversation I had recently with Charlie on the Gégé Lecoutre Memovox, which was a fascinating and very detailed exchange that we had. Let me just dip back in right there. So the scholarly collector was the first type that Nick Bebock identified. Let's see what else he talks about.
And then in the 2000s, we have what I like to call the intellectual collector, the guys obsessed with in-house and independence and, black polishing and these kind of things.
That's very interesting. Again, I do appreciate the penchant for abstraction and generalization. I don't have a problem with it. But of course, again, we don't have to stick to this periodization with 90s for scholarly collectors. 2000s now, Nick says, are for the intellectual collectors who obsessed over the advent of independent makers, the pros and cons of in-house movements. I mean, I think at that era most people were caught up with the supposed advantages of an in-house movement than anything. And I think that's what he meant in either case. And also, that also has a lot to do with the emergence of social media and the macro shots on Instagram, right? People now obsess over the most minute details of movement finishing, whether we are talking about black polish, mirror polish, internal angles, gold chaton, and heat blued screws and whatnot. That Nick claims is the territory of an intellectual collector. I don't see the same kind of coherence in this type that he identifies, but once again, I think you can certainly see the trends, especially with the emergence of social media and its privileging of visuality. You can certainly see people increasingly getting obsessed with certain aspects of artisanal crafts that's distinguished, especially the independent makers who front load that in their presentation, and who are in so many ways also perhaps the best representatives in our time of watchmaking, Swiss watchmaking especially, as it had once been before the quartz crisis, certainly. So the scholarly collector and the intellectual collector. Let's look at the third type that Nick will try to describe.
But for me, it's the modern era that's most interesting, which for me is this anthropological collector, that we have these young collectors in their 20s, from all over the world, Asia, North America, Europe, the Middle East, Australia, wherever it might be, who are amazed by the story of these pieces. But when it comes to vintage, what that means is They want to know who wore this thing.
Right.
That's very fascinating. In many ways, I think, you know, all these different aspects really guide my outlook, at least, both in terms of collecting watches myself and in terms of surveying the entire horological landscape, whether we're talking about vintage pieces or contemporary. So in the third place, Nick is talking about the anthropological collector, whom he identifies as someone who is in their 20s. I'm far from it, but in many ways, as with the other categories that they described, this is the one that really addresses me the most, because I'm always interested in the kinds of stories that define the watches that we wear, that we integrate into our daily life, that we weave into the fabric of our lifestyle. And when it comes to vintage watches, he mentions that usually refers to the person who wore that watch. Now, that can be a family member, and I think that tradition of an heirloom watch in so many different segments and in so many different families existed for a long time. But I think what I would perhaps add is, independent of their age, today's collectors are much more interested in watches that don't perhaps have a necessarily distinguished or famous provenance, but that is watches that are actually connected with a human being, right? And I tried describing this a few live streams back when I was talking about how today's collector doesn't actually run away from engraved casebacks, inscribed casebacks, customized watches in one way or another, especially if that customization, that personalization, that engraving adds another layer of narrative to the watch, adds a sprinkling of a story, a dash of authenticity to that timepiece. I think that's really important, and I think that's what Nick means, because at the end of the day, of course, we all like having that one piece in our collection that is perhaps something that our grandmother wore, that is something that our fathers have bestowed upon us, a pocket watch that perhaps was left to you from your grandfather. Of course, that is always an important part of the horological tradition, but what he's talking about here is this emergence of a new penchant, a new aspiration among collectors to go after pieces that have in fact been customized and personalized, engraved on the caseback by someone else who is not a celebrity, who is not a well-known figure, but whose story somehow adds an additional emotional weight, a kind of anthropological importance, as he put it, to the piece, which I think was a beautiful way to sum things up. Alireza, date night, but my phone really wanted to come by and say hello. Good luck tonight. Also, don't ever vibrate on me there again. Pause. That's I'll make sure not to vibrate on you anywhere, Alireza. But hey, that just shows you how much of a committed fan Ali is he let the notifications on. He clicked the bell icon, as all of you should. Not only did he like the video, subscribed, but also put the notifications on so he can actually get alarmed, gets vibrated on when I'm live. Well, I mean, the kinds of things you have to go through, Ali. I hope you can enjoy the date night. I really do appreciate you. Thank you for dropping by. And again, we talked about how it is Daytona's 60th anniversary, since it was that was born in 1963. Same thing goes for the carrera or carrera or carrera, as Jack Heuer used to say in his particularly German inflected way. It's a beautiful watch. I think they did a great job with this particular piece. The Panda version was probably the collectible version, the vintage Carrera that traded so highly. And they made something a little bit more modern out of it, of course. It's an enlarged case size. Otherwise, the ancestors of this watch are, of course, 36 millimeters, whereas this modern version of the 2447 is actually 39 millimeters. Of course, it also has an exhibition case back and an automatic movement. So basically a modernized version of 2447 SN. S is the one for the silvered dial, the silvered sunray brushed part of the dial. I think it is actually Soleil in French, if I'm not mistaken. And N predictably is noir, and it refers to the color of the chronograph registers, which have that radial guilloche that gives them that vinyl-like groove. Great contrast. The vintage visual effects are not overdone. And I'm not surprised that even at that price point, which was $7,400 US, it sold out pretty quickly. This was limited to 600 pieces. We'll see how they trend on the secondary markets. Usually they do retain their value quite well. I'm talking about these strongly vintage inspired and more or less authentically reproduced re-editions of iconic Heuer models. They usually do quite well. So let's see how this one will go. Before I go back to Tag Heuer, I want to share with you the new release that was on the thumbnail. This is a brand that we talked about before. Airain was one of those makers that got the Type 20 contract from the French Ministry of Defense. Historically, much like Maté Tissot, much like Dodin, much like Breguet and some others. And it's a brand that was recently revived by a Dutch person, if I'm not mistaken, who is also behind the revival of Le Bois and company. We have talked about before how they were releasing these historically authentic pieces that are quite faithful reproductions of the Type 20 with the actual flyback function, with, of course, the visual aesthetics and the authentic look of the Type 20 with these oversized bicompacts, chronograph layout, black matte dial, on which you have, again, large Arabic numerals for maximum visibility. Of course, a 12-hour countdown rotational bezel, and a chronograph, a hand-wound chronograph, in fact, that has the start-stop and reset, and of course with a flyback function. Now, flyback chronographs, of course, are heavily associated with aviation, and especially military aviation, because they were integral parts. I'm wearing one today. This is my modern revival Breguet Type 20, which has the automatic flyback movement. So the flyback function basically allows you to time intervals in close succession. So you can simply press, oops. Let me see. Let me wind it a little bit. So you can, with any other chronograph, you have to start, stop, and reset, right? So you need a number of steps. When you're charting your path and when this is your instrument, right, you don't have all these modern cockpit instruments at the time. This is mid-20th century. The flyback function allows you to quickly start timing a new interval just by pressing the reset. Whereas in any other chronograph, you would have to stop and then reset. Anyway, I think that's quite clear. Thomas, feel free to jump on, by the way. Join me with your whiskey. But we were talking about Airain and their Type 20 flyback chronographs. This is another limited edition they came up with. Kind of a stealth look, as its French name would testify. It's furtivité, which simply means stealth. stainless steel, of course, but it is DLC coated to look in this shade of gunmetal gray, and that is actually matched by the color of the dial, which is also an anthracite gray, and the suede strap in gray completes this monochromatic look, against which you have those sharp baton hands, these pointed baton hands, and the Arabic numerals, which share that faux patina look. An important difference in this particular generation of Airain Type 20 flyback chronographs is the new movement. They used to get their calibers from Lajoux-Perret, which is a very well-respected movement manufacturer in Switzerland. But apparently Lajoux-Perret upgraded their chronograph movement from 7733, which Airain used as the base of their movement for previous generations of their Type 20. And the new movement Lajoux-Perret had did not actually provide a flyback function, and since that was so integral to a Type 20 chronograph, so important for this particular piece, they actually collaborated, Airain communicated and collaborated with AMT, which is Selita's high-grade movement manufacturer, and they made for Airain a hand-wound column wheel flyback chronograph movement that they provided for this generation and more generations to come, I think. So this is the Furtivité, the stealth edition, which is limited to 134 pieces. And it's priced at 2,900 euro. And that price actually includes shipping and all kinds of customs, fees, duties, taxes, wherever you are, as long as they deliver to your country. So if you're ordering from the US, for example, they pay for the shipping and the custom duties and other fees that the watch might incur. If you are ordering from within the European Union, they cover the shipping and VAT is included. Same with the UK. You order it, this is all you will pay. That includes shipping and any customs and duties and fees that it might incur. The delivery is going to be apparently in the fourth quarter of this year. They're already accepting pre-orders. You can either pay the deposit, which is half the amount at 1450 euro, or if you're feeling generous, I don't know why you would do that, but I guess there's the option. You can actually pay off the full amount now. So this is the Stealth Edition, stainless steel with DLC coating in gunmetal gray, which gives the watch a beautiful anthracite monochromatic look. And they also have something that is a little more historically accurate, so to speak, and that also offers a lower price point too, at 2650, at 2,650 in euro. So this is a piece that has a matte black dial, and it has the 12-hour countdown bezel and a stainless steel case that is matched with a cognac strap. So it has a little bit of a contrast there, and I think I like that. I mean, I have a dark brown strap here. I don't think this is a watch that I would want to wear with a black strap ever. But a lighter color of a lighter shade of brown, I think, really opens the watch up and makes it look somehow a little cooler, I have to say. I really like this Alcantara strap that I matched it up with, but I used to wear it with a lighter Breguet alligator strap, which looked also quite nice. So this is the same logic. I don't think it's a limited edition or a numbered edition, but usually they have a particular window in which they take pre-orders and then they deliver the watches a few months down the line. So if you're actually interested, I would highly recommend that you go in, put down the deposit, and complete your pre-order. I really like Type 20s. I like the two register look on this, though it makes the watch look even more balanced. I like the fact that they have a flyback chronograph movement that is column wheel, that is hand wound. Airain is probably the brand today that makes the most authentic reproductions of the Type 20 chronographs, even better than Breguet, which is a brand that actually discontinued practically the entire line. Because again, it's a manual wind piece, it's a column wheel piece, it has the flyback function, and the outlines and contours of the case look much more like the military and even the civilian versions that have been sold in the 50s and 60s and for so long. So I really admire the kind of work they do. I like that it's a solid case back. I also like the fact that the case is the original, close to the original dimensions, with less than 40 millimeters at 39 and a half, and the thickness is less than 11 millimeters. So combined with the domed crystal, you still have a height that's very manageable. The watch has respectable water resistance, not something that you would want to swim with, but at 5 atmos, it would get you through most dynamic situations, and also has a very respectable power reserve of 63 hours, plus or minus 2. It's a very cool watch, I think, both in the more historically authentic version here, which is the re-edition with the stainless steel case, matte black dial, and the version they called Furtivité, which is DLC coated in gunmetal gray and has this monochromatic look in anthracite that is completed with the gray suede strap, and that has a slight premium at 2,900 euro. Thomas Burnett says, I love the Type 20. So many companies that made them, Breguet, Maté Tissot, Airain, Dodin, Oricoste. There are some Girard Perregaux ones, but they're mostly understood to be made by Maté Tissot, but so were the Breguets. So, but yes, there's a slightly contested provenance to the GP Type 20s, but they do exist. I saw the recent Hemel Maté Tissot version, but you're right, these are nicer reeditions. Again, you know, it's a little bit of my prejudice and my preferences at work when I say that these are better. But maybe on a more objective level, Thomas, especially when you go to the re-edition version like these, visually speaking, functionally speaking, this is as close as it gets. I mean, my only qualm would be, again, I'm just nitpicking at this point, if you actually went the extra mile of this time, contracting Celita to make a flyback chrono movement for you, why not get one with the 15 minutes counter, 15-minute totalizer rather than 30, and kind of up the ante in terms of historical authenticity, in terms of you know, perhaps even making it a big eye at 3 o'clock. They could have done something like that, but it's okay because there were a lot of versions of the Type 20 that were issued in this particular layout as well. But they could have at least tinkered with the movement to make it a 15-minute totalizer. Then it would have been more historically authentic, but perhaps too confusing for someone who just wants a cool chronograph with a nice story. Because people are not used to minute counters that are other than 30, sometimes 45, but it's very rare that, you know, you see a 15-minute totalizer on a modern watch. So yeah, and they have this lovely animation with the slider, you know, where you see an authentic vintage Airain Type 20 and the modern version, which has, of course, more jewels in the movement that is marked on the dial. I'm so glad that they, you know, again, they stood closer to what they produced historically rather than trying to come up with the modern remake that reproduces the platonic ideal of the watch. So I do appreciate them, don't take me wrong. I did like the big eye at 3 o'clock on the Hemel Maté Tissot version, more faithful to the original design, I guess. Again, the original designs varied from one era to another, from one maker to another. It's also varied on the commission, you know, whether it was made to sell for civilians or made to be issued for the air forces of the French Navy. But yeah, you are by and large right. I mean, recently Masena Lab made a collaboration too, right? those were cool watches too, but I think they sold out very quickly and didn't, didn't last for too long, right? Yeah, these were the two that Masséna Lab did with Maté Tissot, and it was strange because the tribute was the one that did not have the Flyback chronograph but had the vintage look. And it was only 99 pieces. And then, the Flyback version, which was a little more expensive, actually had a matte black dial and had a Flyback function. Again, I have a soft spot for these oversized Arabic numerals and the syringe hands and the big eye look, by all means. But when you look at the qualities of the movements, the aesthetics of the watches, I just appreciate Airain a little better than everyone else who makes a Type 20 chronograph these days, especially now that Breguet is out of the picture. The decision is so much easier to make, honestly. There's another Flyback chronograph that I wanted to consider with you guys, and this is a release that I actually missed back. As you know, LVMH watches had an event, an entire week in Singapore, where they released one watch after another. Bulgari was part of the picture, of course. So was Tag Heuer. So was Zenit. So was Hublot. So were some others. I missed this Altavia, which is a 42 millimeter chronograph based on the H02 movement with the added Flyback function. It is a 3 register chronograph with the date at 6 o'clock. And it is also chronometer certified too. Pardon me. And as you can see, this is also a piece that leans more heavily on the aviation part of Altavia's heritage, right? With those oversized Arabic numerals that are generously filled with loom, with the sword hands that are set off against a black dial. In this case, you have a rotational timing bezel that is graduated to all 60 minutes, and it is actually a ceramic insert which completes that largely monochromatic picture. Black, of course, and you have the model name Altavia in orange right at 12 o'clock, which is actually occupied by the brand logo. Again, the 42 millimeter case is a little oversized for the particular tradition of this sort of aviation related or inspired flyback chronograph, but Altavia isn't necessarily focusing on that legacy. It's also a pretty thick watch at almost 16 millimeters, 15.68, 21 millimeters of a lug width as well. So quite a presence on the wrist. It's a little more tricked out than the other watches that we have been looking at, whether we are talking about the Airain Type 20 or even the Carrera 60th anniversary re-edition. But the HO2 that is presented here is a great movement, automatic column wheel, 80 hours of power reserve. It has basically everything that you can expect from a modern chronograph movement. The Heuer 02 column wheel, vertical clutch, in this case chronometer certified with the added flyback option, and a power reserve of 80 hours. That's very, very good for a modern movement that beats at 4 hertz. $100 of a depth rating, water resistant up to 100 meters. It's served up at a black alligator strap that has kind of a quick exchange ability there. And this piece actually is listed at 6,750. So it's a hefty price tag, I have to say. Again, I feel Airain is a very strong contender, but this is a different kind of watch. Certainly, if you are a Heuer collector and you want to add something modern into your collection, into your constellation, you want a flyback chronograph that has that modern look while it is still connected to the aviation heritage. I think this is a decent piece. Thank you, my friend. I saw this Altavia today, more of a car racing chronograph than an aviation chronograph. Well, it's both. It's both. I think visually it looks more like a mid-century aviation chronograph than more. Altavia, as you know, is literally a conjunction of these two genres. So it's supposed to represent both in a way. Automotive racing and aviation technology. So Altavia. So that's what it's supposed to be. And I think this one with the short hands and large Arabic numerals, looks more like an aviation chronograph to me. The flyback function especially. And that's how they present it as well, an homage to its timeless aviation inspired heritage. That's all. I think, yes, this would be actually a nice oversized alternative to um, to a Type 20 style chronograph. I don't like, I really don't like date windows on chronographs, but that's just me. If you are more of a Zenith guy, I'm sure you would find a lot to adore in this particular piece. For me, that's a nuisance. For others, it's a mark of utility, and we'll have to agree to disagree. But that's, for me, very subjective. I'm glad Tim G agrees, but your mileage might vary. There's a small release that kind of fell through the cracks by Zenit, and also apparently by Tissot as well, which I will talk about very quickly, or show rather. Zenit came out with a boutique edition of their Defy Skyline. I'm more of a fan of the old school Defy revival. The Defy Skyline has a 14 rather than the octagonal case. It has a 14 I'm sorry, I'm kind of blanking out on my words here, but it has the bezel. How many? 14 corners, no? Yeah, I think it has 14 corners. Tetradecagonal, that's what it's called, probably. Anyway, I used to like the Defy Revival case design, but in this particular look, I think the dial is really cool. I love the pattern they have on the dial, which is their four-pointed star logo. The star being, of course, a very time-honored symbol of the brand, logo of the brand. They use both the five-pointed star, as you can see here, at 12 o'clock, but oftentimes you would see in their iconography this four-pointed star too, which they in this case integrated into the design of the watch as the decoration of the dial, and that is also matched with the index markers, as well as the hour and minute hands, as well as the tenth of a second indicator as well, which remains a cool feature of the watch that's located at 9 o'clock, with the dates balancing out the picture at 3 o'clock. Apparently, it comes on the interchangeable steel bracelet, as well as a black patterned rubber strap, 41 millimeter case, high beat movement at 5 hertz, 36,000 oscillations per hour, 60-hour power reserve, and 100 meters of water resistance, 10 atmos of depth rating. The boutique edition of the Zenit Defy Skyline is priced at $9,000. Hey, Nick Butter. Nice to see you, man. Yeah, well, that's what happens, Nick Butter. When you defy your own catalog, when you mess with your own heritage, you end up looking like the copy of someone else. Because when you look at the Defy Revival, which is actually a model they came out with in 1968, if I'm not mistaken, 68 or 69. Someone may correct me in the chat, but I think the original Zenit Defy, which visually was very similar to this piece, the Defy Revival, actually came out before the Royal Oak, and had this octagonal case with accentuated chamfers, which I personally really like. I'm not such a huge fan of the tetradecagonal bezel, but the octagonal case, especially in this emphatic style, really appeals to me. I kind of like the the kind of Godron decorated, or Gadroon, as they call it English, decorated indices as well. I think the Zenit Defy in its original form and its revival form is a much more interesting watch to me. The Defy Skyline just looks like any other Royal Oak copy. Just looks like the Laureato, just looks like any other thing that you can think of in terms of Royal Oak copies, including some time-honored designs by other brands as well. Burnett says, I think that vintage Heuer are amazing chronographs to jump into their rabbit hole. The Autavia, Camaro, Pre-Carreras, Monza, and the others are beautiful. I'm going to actually treat my Patreon subscribers to the entire archive of Carrera and other vintage Heuer chronographs that I've been scouring all over Chrono 24 in the last 2 months. JB, nice to see you, man. So yeah, if you are wait for it, if you are in in my Patreon, if you want to see some great deals on vintage Heuer chronographs, feel free to sign up. The link is in the chat, but I will the link is in the video description, but I will drop it right there as well. Feel free to check it out. And while you're at it, please hit the like button. That really, really helps. It gives me that extra boost. And I want to welcome again all of you, Nick Butter, Davi85, and Jake Brooks. Welcome back. And as a quick reminder, the entries are still accepted for this month's raffle. Tuesday is going to be the last day. Until then, the first and last super chat of every live stream gets entered into the raffle, gets a unique number. If you want to check the status of the competition, look at the guidelines, as well as the full list of entrants with all the numbers. Feel free to take a quick look at the community page and scroll down a little bit. You will see it. But now that my friend Thomas brought up the vintage Heuer legacy, I want to share a few things. We were talking about Air Force watches and flyback chronographs. So I'll bless you with a couple of examples from Heuer's catalog. One of which made a quick appearance in the reference points video. I don't know if you guys noticed it, but there was a Heuer chronograph that was actually a 2-register Carrera with a kind of Basil's bezels super chats $9.99. So Basil got the first entry, and Thomas Burnett $4.99. Enter Junior Johnson into the raffle for me, please. If your chat ends up being if your super chat ends up being the last one, for sure I will enter him instead of you. But he already has a number, I think, at least one, perhaps even more. Let me check the community page as I'm adding Basil's bezels. So the last number in the last live stream was 49. Right? Yeah. So Basil's bezels gets number 50. And he already has a few numbers. Junior Johnson has 4 numbers so far. But yes, if that ends up being this last super chat of the day, I'll happily add his name instead of yours, Thomas. So it turns out that the Tissot PRX actually had a turquoise dial option for the Powermatic 80 that they introduced into the lineup in a sneaky way without announcing it, which is really weird to me. But I think it is now there, perhaps sold out on the webpage, but that's where we are going next. There you go. There was that, robin's egg shade in the 35 millimeter quartz version. Now the PRX Powermatic 80 also has its piece of the Tiffany blue bag experience. If you couldn't get one of the 170 Tiffany blue 5711s, here is your chance. Apparently they are sold out for now on the website, but they should be back in stock. And I know this piece has been available through authorized dealers and other Tissot retailers for a while now. So maybe if you use the find a retailer function, you might be able to see one that is closer to home, that is closer to you. But that's a relatively new release that Tissot snuck into the lineup after they had already introduced the smaller size quartz movement version. I love this. Swissness. That's a great quality for a watch. On a scale of 1 to Swiss, what is the Swissness of your watch? There you go. A lot of these are already sold out on the web page, so you will need to click the notification button to get an alert in your mailbox once they are restocked. But there is now a Tiffany blue or turquoise dial version of the Tissot PRX Powermatic 80. So feel free to get yours. I know these have been really popular in that particular segment. Again, very fun watches. I love the Powermatic 80 movement. Essentially, what the Swatch Group did there was to take the ETA 2824-2 movement base and dial it down a little bit. Basically, reduce it to 21,800 semi-oscillations per hour from 28,800. So from 4 hertz to 3. And I know, without giving them free advertisement, I'm sure you can figure it out. One of the popular strap makers actually has come up with customized straps for the Tissot PRX range. So that would make them probably much more modular and much more attractive to many who might not necessarily enjoy the bracelet as much. Nick Butter, not too concerned about the context on this super chat, just supporting the channel. I appreciate you, man. It's you're great, Nick Butter. Thank you so much for your support and presence. Thank you so much for being in the chat and being so generous with your super chats. Thomas says the PRX is a great watch. The interchangeable strap system makes it a very versatile piece indeed. I completely agree, Thomas. If I didn't have such a militant commitment to the Seikos in that range, I would have gotten one myself. But I think, I think I'm fine with my Seikos at that price point. Nick Butter says, on my IG, I just gave Tissot a lot of free advertising. Yeah, people look. That's the great thing about social media in this day and era. If you come up with a decent product, if you come up with a product that provides a lot of quality that matches up with the price point, which is basically the definition of this watch, you get a great piece you can wear day in, day out, 80 hours of power reserve. Nick Bebach was just making fun of the so-called intellectual or pseudo-intellectual collector who goes insane about in-house calibers or this and that. Power reserve is something that I value, not to the point of a fixation. I'm a vintage watch guy, right? For me, you know, when I pick up a watch from my collection, adjusting it, correcting it, setting it in the right way, especially if it's a complicated piece, is part of the experience. It is part of my interaction with the timepiece. It is something that I actually enjoy. But for modern pieces, especially as the price point escalates, I want everything from them, right? If I'm gonna pay $50,000 for a watch, it better have at least, you know, 60, 72 hours of power reserve. Now, this piece, as with a lot of other watches that sport the Powermatic 80 movement in the Swatch Group constellation of brands, gives you 80 hours of power reserve when you remove the watch from your wrist. That's great. If you have a 4-piece collection, you can keep this piece in circulation without having to worry about resetting the time or resetting the dates. It will, you'll pick it up every third or fourth day, and you'll most probably be just fine. Ah, exactly. So Davi gives that example. I have a Hamilton with the H10 Powermatic 80 since 2018, and it's been an exceptionally accurate movement. There you go. The Powermatic 80 is Swatch Group's secret weapon. Big Meat says, just tuned to see Lords talking about fake Royal Oak. Disgusting. And Thomas says, it's not a fake Royal Oak. Integrated bracelets are very popular at the moment. The Chapek Antarctique is a prime example. Now, that's a watch that I actually really like. Yeah, let's bring it up. The Chapek Antarctique. As you guys know, they have for a while put a moratorium on taking orders on the Chapek Antarctique. I actually like my favorite of their line happens to be the 7-day hand wound piece. I especially like versions of it that are a little more sporty, you know, with that single Arabic numeral at 12 o'clock. The power reserve indicator, which also serves as day of the week with a pointer. Yeah, and it's just a very cool watch. I'm not so much for the fleur de lis hands, especially when it's combined. Well, I'm not so much for the Roman numerals, I should say, on these watches, especially when they're combined with the fleur de lis hands. But this particular configuration, the Arabic numeral with the skeletonized spare hands and that stunning guilloche ricochet dial with the ripple effect in certain points. For me, it's an incredible watch. I have had the pleasure of trying one of these on at the Cellini Jewelers in New York. So let me bring that up. Yeah, it's really an amazing piece. I mean, the kind of work you have on these pieces at a price point which for some of these new independents is actually quite reasonable. I mean, this piece was, I think, around, I want to say 17,000. At Cellini, it was like 17,500 or something. It sold out on their own webpage, but it says 18,000 Swiss francs. But the price on the tag at Cellini was even cheaper than that. The movement itself is also very handsome, skeletonized at parts. A very cool piece. And as with a lot of the other watches, it's something that you can customize to a certain extent when you order it directly from them. So that's always very attractive. We were supposed to look at the Antarctique, of course. Let's see if we can actually get to that page, since they don't want us to get there. Let's click the archive piece. Okay. They have all these different dial options. Again, either the doubled index markers at 12 o'clock or the single Arabic numeral. You can get it in the regular size, and they have also introduced a smaller size. This is 40.5. And then the smaller size is, I think, 38.5. Yeah. The so-called exclusive Stairway to Heaven guilloche dial that is made by Metallem, and the integrated bracelet, which actually integrates the initial of the brand name, the Ch, so to speak, as a mirror polished interlink, which is an amazing look, if you ask me. I know they have come into a lot of negative attention too, because of course the brand name itself resembles Patek. The design of the watch is somewhat derivative of a lot of the icons of this integrated bracelet, stainless steel, luxury sports watch look. I understand all of that, but probably this is a watch that I like a lot more than the Defy Skyline, a lot more than the Girard-Perregaux Laureato, even more than the Chopard Alpine Eagle as well. Again, with all the customization options they have, I'm sure they can make a version without the dates to one day, which could be very attractive, unless I can get a Royal Oak by that time. Hopefully, that's still the plan before I'm 40. This is the highlight of the watch for me, really, those skeletonized finger bridges, or at least partially skeletonized, I have to say. And the micro rotor movement with the platinum weight. I appreciate it. I mean, it's a beautiful movement with a nice architecture. It is actually, so far at least, or at least at the time that it came out, it was their first manufactured caliber, first one that they have fully developed in-house. So that's cool. And of course, they also have the interchangeable strap system. And in fact, you can, when you could order it, with an additional rubber strap and or a leather strap as well. And it has actual water resistance at 120 meters. So that's not bad, right? We were just complaining yesterday, well, 2 days ago rather, about how it's disappointing that in older generations, in the pioneers of this genre, you have a lot of luxury watches that have no more than 50 meters, which again, personally, it's not a problem for me, nor is the power reserve. But when you start talking about watches that already retail at $35,000 and oftentimes go for multiple times that price on the secondary market, you expect the most from them. It's a different segment. So I'm glad when Chapek entered the segment, they came up with a movement that was unique to them in its architecture and in its execution. A movement that has a respectable power reserve at 60 hours. Something that integrates the sleekness of a micro rotor caliber, and a watch that also has 120 meters, which is to say 12 atmos of water resistance as well. Big Meat says the PRX was made for broke punters to pretend and try to fake people into thinking they're wearing a Royal Oak. It doesn't, I mean, the PRX doesn't look like a Royal Oak at all. The dial, maybe. I think when it comes to the PRX, the only thing that looks like the Royal Oak is the dial. And honestly, the stamped waffle dial look, if you're if you're not legally blind, you should be able to tell that's not the pantograph carved, pantograph engraved tapisserie dial, but something that is stamped. It's not true. Yeah, Davi is saying about the Chapek Quai de Berg that you can see how the dial plays with the color. I really enjoyed that particular watch. I mean, it's and again, this is artificial light. I'm in the boutique. I'm inside the Cellini Jewelers in New York. I mean, which is a great store, a very inviting store, but you know, it suffers from the same affliction that every single watch boutique basically does. A lot of exposure to artificial lighting. So, but even then, this was a striking piece to behold, and it speaks a lot of value, I think, to Chapek as a brand. I would honestly, as much as I like the Antarctique, I would recommend a piece like this than the Antarctique to get into the brand a little bit. Okay, before I got sidetracked, I was going to show you some Heuers with military provenance, and let me just do that. One is actually a Carrera technically, but an aviation model that was produced for the Belgian Air Force. As you can see, it is a 2-register chronograph, and that's bicompax layout is perfectly aligned with that oversized crown, both in terms of its proportions and placement. A 30-minute totalizer at 3 o'clock, running seconds at 9, and of course a centrally deployed chronograph seconds hand, oversized Arabic numerals in generous amounts of loom, stick hands against a matte black dial with beautiful, sharply angular lugs. This is the Belgian Air Force Heuer Carrera. And if I'm not mistaken, it is actually built on a Valjoux 92, I want to say. No, actually, Valjoux 7733, which is an ancestor of the 7750, the ever conspicuous 7750, except this is a hand-wound movement, as you can see. Marked, of course, Heuer Leonidas, both on the bridge and on the inside of the case back. These are pretty spicy, I have to say. I think it has a lot to do with their limited numbers. They're also increasingly more difficult to find in this kind of authentic and unabused condition. So mid tens is what one might expect to pay, but they are fantastic pieces. A lot of authentic coolness. Great looking watch, as long as you don't have an issue with that particular military provenance, it should be a cool watch to acquire. And as you can see, all of them have that particular military issue engraving on the back. So Luchtmacht and Force Airain, 36 millimeter case, bicompax layout, Valjoux 7733 movement. My personal favorite is the mid-century flyback chronograph that was actually supplied to the German Air Force between years 1955 to 1990 by Heuer. And it is basically a flyback chronograph in an oversized case. So it has everything that we have been looking at previously within that genre of aviation inspired mid-century flyback chronographs, whether it was the Airain or Altavia. This is a kind of watch that has a lot of the vintage charm we associate with classic Rolex vintage pieces, right? You have a beautifully patinated tritium luminosity against a matte black dial, and even a kind of red writing within a circle that you see at 6 o'clock, which is 3H, and which specifies the kind of luminous material used on the dial, i.e. 3H, also called as tritium. You also have a wholly graduated 60 minutes timing bezel that's rotational bidirectionally, and the centrally deployed chronograph seconds hand has a spade at its end with a sharp arrow, which gives this particular piece a very distinctive look. As always, you can see the marks of Bundeswehr with the unique issue number engraved on the case back. Again, a mid-century flyback chronograph with lots of vintage charm and actual military provenance. This is the Heuer Bundeswehr reference 1550 SG with Valjoux 230 based caliber and a 43 millimeter case. Thank you, Davi. I appreciate you. And of course, Thomas, I knew that you would share my taste in this as well. Now, this particular seller has it listed for around 6,000, but they also accept offers, and they trade, in a more realistic market, they really trade more for $4,500, $5,000. That's, I think, a realistic range at this point in time. I don't urge or rush anyone to make any purchases at this point in time, because I think the downward trends that we have been observing on the secondary market of watches, the dip in prices that we have seen and experienced since last year, already in March, in a process that already began in March 2022, I should say. I think that trend is going to continue, at least in the short term. So I would rather wait towards the end of the year, but there's still some good deals to come by. So if you find this piece anywhere under $5,000, I think it could be a decent deal. And certainly, again, they have a lot of charm, a lot of charisma, a lot of authenticity, everything you can expect from that mid-century tool watch is there for the Heuer Bundeswehr chronograph. And they're probably really the best deal when it comes to that particular category. They're also, the same Flyback chronograph was issued to the Italians as well, and that one was branded Leonidas. So you can find the Leonidas Flyback chronograph more or less the same watch that was issued for the Italians rather than the Germans. Hit the like button, please. I will take a quick break. In the meantime, I think I will leave you with the Grail Watch number 6, which Revolution / Grail Watch / De Bethune introduced in a way without really offering them for sale. But it's better than nothing. At least we have a new watch. We have another watch to talk about. And I will be right back. Okay, so Grail Watch just came out with their 6th project. As you know, we have started observing, a certain trend on Revolution Watch, where they have been literally transformed into something like Messina Lab. Of course, they still produce great content, both in written form and in video format on YouTube. I've always actually liked the fact that Revolution, no pun intended, revolves around Waco's personality. And he has a very strong and interesting personality. So why shouldn't they use it? And I've also increasingly enjoyed the introduction of a new cast of characters. The presentations that Waco does with Jeremiah, I think, have already become a kind of modern classic. I'm a fan of Eleanor Picciotto as much as anyone else. But there has been a trend where, every other week they come up with a new watch release, a new collaboration, and they have now an entire arm in Grail Watch where they basically present even the more ambitious projects in these collaborations. And they just announced, as already sold out, 5 examples of De Bethune's DB25 perpetual calendar in the reduced size of 40 millimeters. That has been one of the sticking points of De Bethune watches, beyond, of course, the particular price point. I think the fact that a lot of their watches are quite oversized, 44 millimeters, and sometimes even slightly larger, at times a little smaller, but usually at that particular range. And that was certainly the case for the previous generations of the DB25 perpetual calendar, which was the first of its kind when it was introduced in 2011 with this spherical moon phase. Which I think is made in palladium and steel. It also has, paralleling that, balancing it out at 6 o'clock, a pointer date. The day of the week is presented, displayed through an opening at 9 o'clock, and the month at 3 o'clock. And you have this beautifully scalloped guilloche pattern on the dial that seems to be divided to 12 slices of equal proportion. And in this particular example, the shades of navy blue on the dial provide a great contrast to the highly polished grade 5 titanium of the case, which is matched with an alligator strap that sports similar shades of blue with contrast stitching that's in a slightly lighter hue. And it is also a double-sided alligator strap with large rectangular scales on the outside and smaller scales for the lining. And you have, of course, the self-winding caliber DB2324 V2, which has a power reserve of a full 5 days. And I don't know where I exactly read it, but in one of the press releases that Grail Watch or Revolution had about this particular piece, they have basically admitted that the earlier edition of the DB25 perpetual calendar that came out actually came out in the reduced size to amortize this particular edition, this particular limited run of 5 watches at 130,000 Swiss francs a pop. In US dollars, it comes out to 142,000 exactly. This is a piece that they call Grail Watch number 6, De Bethune DB25 perpetual calendar in the reduced case size of 40 millimeters, the Rhapsody in blue. DB25 was first seen in 2007. It was the result of the brand's desire to clarify and simplify its vision into 2 key models, the DB25 and DB28. Both expressed different aspects of De Bethune's essence. The DB28 was more avant-garde, while the DB25 was neoclassicist at heart. DB25 perpetual calendar entered the conversation in 2011, and it featured De Bethune hallmarks, the exquisite titanium case with those scalloped lugs, the phenomenal movement with its spherical moon. It was architectural perfection, sized at 44 millimeters. Until in 2022, the brand improved on perfection by releasing a 40 millimeter version with a dial in silver and blue guilloche, which we will take a look at momentarily. The shift in size to more classical proportions is dramatic, and it is in line perfectly with contemporary tastes. It's also worth noting this adjustment is only possible because of the in-house skills De Bethune has honed over the last quarter century. Unlike the 2-tone dial of the regular model, this version, Grail Watch 6, De Bethune 25 perpetual calendar 40 millimeters Rhapsody in blue, changes the tone. We have opted for a solid hand-blued guilloche dial with 12 radiating sectors, perfectly complemented by a star-studded sky in blue titanium. Like the Gershwin tune it's named for, the watch is haunting, evocative, unforgettable. I mean, again, it's a cool watch, kind of cruel to introduce it even as it was already fully committed in only 5 examples. But it is what it is. Mhm. That's a cool slogan. Not doing more, but instead doing better. This was the earlier release in their current collection of a 40 millimeter perpetual calendar for the DB25. Again, they have that 2-tone dial with the outer ring of the hours in this cobalt kind of blue and silver guilloche dial at the center, which has that 12 sector look with a radiating guilloche pattern. .40 millimeters, a thickness of 11.3 millimeters, the integrated hollowed lugs, double anti-reflective coating on a sapphire crystal, open back, polished platinum movement, titanium and platinum balance wheel with Blom studs, de Bethune balance spring with flat terminal curve that is patented by de Bethune, silicon escape wheel, and optimized oscillating weights in titanium and white gold on that balance, as you can see. Right here. I mean, this watch was already kind of cool. I don't know what the list price already was. I can only imagine. Let me see. Yeah, that was 125,000 in Swiss francs, which basically comes to 140,000 in US dollars anyways. Before I forget, yesterday already, for those of you who are in the UK and in Europe, and for those of us in the US, we still have less than a couple of hours left here. It is George Harrison's birthday today. He happens to be my favorite Beatle. He would have been 80 years old, and I found this picture of him wearing a Cartier London baignoire, you know, that bathtub looking watch, the crash before it has been melted, so to speak. But it's a very cool piece, and I actually cribbed the picture from a seller on eBay who basically sold a similar watch. I really like these pieces in the allongé version, but this is also quite cool and kind of a delicate, dainty look, if you like that for dress watches. This is a very similar piece from Cartier London in the same time period. on an eBay listing that's already been sold. This is the piece that George was wearing. And here you can see him with a tiny little cat. It's a cool piece. I do really like it in the allongé version that I think they have in the lineup these days. Let me see. The larger versions are almost always gem sets, so that's not encouraging. And they're really only offered as women's watches, and the small one actually has a quartz movement. But there we go. This is what we have in today's watch. This is still the Cartier London model from the late 60s, which has actually a JLC movement in it. A lot of the Cartier watches with those hand-wound movements from that time period would have calibers that are made by Jaeger-LeCoultre, and they would be either inscribed Jaeger-LeCoultre or European Watch Company. So those are both different kinds of JLC movements that power Cartier watches from the time period. And it turns out they only have the small model with the quartz movements these days. But there we go. This is what we have. They don't list the price, unfortunately. Yellow gold. It's a cool piece, but too small and too delicate for a man to wear for our time and age, I have to say. At least not my taste, but by all means. I kind of like the design, honestly. I'm not a huge fan of the pebble. I do think the crash is a little overrated, but in either case, Cartier certainly has a lot of interesting pieces that have very distinctive design. So that always has to be noted. Hey, Fries, nice to see you, man. Davi says, while I find the Betune to be technically impressive, let's go back to them for a second. And the engineering amazing. The styling just doesn't resonate with me. I think they're an acquired taste, and not a taste that you necessarily would want to force yourself to acquire, to be sure. For me, the gears really clicked in place for me when I started thinking about them as science fiction meets Breguet. It's a very interesting brand. You can also simply say Star Trek meets Breguet, as one of the members of the audience put it one day. I've always appreciated them, like you, from a technical standpoint, from the standpoint of material innovation, from the kind of in-house expertise and Denis Flagiolet's just obsessive dedication to his craft was really brought me kind of into admiring the brand a little more closely, a little more intimately. Speaking of things that Revolution did, speaking of things that Waco has done with the Revolution, they have that 3-part documentary that they did of De Bethune recently, and the entire 3rd part is actually dedicated to the work that Denis Flagiolet does in his workshop. But the first 2 parts are quite interesting and engaging as well. So I would recommend that entire documentary. It's a great work. Yes, I really like George Harrison. I was very happy to find this particular picture while I was searching a picture of his with this Cartier Bagnouard. It's a much better shot than the one with the cat that I had seen before. So I'm glad I came across that eBay listing, which is this particular seller, by the way, Guy Gohari, Classic 55. He has a lot of interesting pieces, usually things that are a little more off the cuff, uniquely shaped. A little more off the radar. So it's a pretty good collection. And I think it's this one that he was selling on eBay at the time. Oh yeah, this must be it. Very cool. Yeah, he has the favorite watch of Piroca, our very own Swiss, the Saltarello. Let's see when he shows that. He had used it on the cover, but it's not the first watch that he shows there. Yeah. A lot of unique pieces. A lot of dress watches. I like these sorts of vintage sellers, um, people who have their own specialty. Yeah, that's really a beautiful, beautiful piece. Increasingly, I love um, these sorts of jump hour pieces. It's um, it's a fantastic opportunity to to see both the technical capabilities of a maker, but also, since you are a lot of times dealing with lots of negative space on the dial, in a way, their artistic vision in terms of the layout they achieve, as well as the range of traditional and artisanal crafts they can use, whether it is in the manner of guillochage or enamel techniques. Um, this was my experience with Anderson, for example, um, that I had a chance to try at Asprey in New York City when I was visiting there. This is, of course, their unique guilloche, hand guilloche um, piece with the magical lozenge pattern. And it is actually a 21 carat blued gold dial. So very unique, very precious, very special. And more recently, I was mentioning just a couple of days ago, um, Bill Sanders, who got the Chanel Monsieur for his jump hour piece. It's really gorgeously laid out here. You can see the the jump hour is actually at 6 o'clock. It has a very unique font that's quite consistent across the dial. The seconds on a small subdial is located almost at the center of the watch, and around it in a 270-degree configuration, you have the 60 minutes retrograde minute indicator as well. It's an amazing piece. And this piece has a movement that was produced in collaboration with Romain Gauthier, whose brand apparently is also partially owned by Chanel. Well, I mean, apparently Chanel has a stake in the Romain Gauthier brand. Chanel has a friendly interest, as they put it, in the Romain Gauthier brand, in the same way they have a stake in FP Jaune. And Caliber 1, in many ways, conveys a lot of the visual architecture you can see in Romain Gauthier watches, especially in terms of its circular bridge. And again, the movement has 72 hours of power reserve thanks to its double barrel construction. And 72 hours is relatively impressive power reserve when it comes to this particular complication, because the jumping hours is a rather power hungry complication. So 72 hours is pretty impressive. Burnett, Thomas Burnett, talking about George Harrison reminds me of John Harrison, the carpenter turned clockmaker who devised a clock to tell longitude on the seas, being able to tell the time in other places and navigate. Speaking of which, Thomas, if I ever make the bank, I will most certainly get a marine chronometer myself. You know, that has to be part of my collection at a certain point in time. I don't know what I can afford. I don't know what I can get eventually, but I would like to get one. I think I'm more interested in acquiring a marine chronometer than a pocket watch, honestly. As I think of kind of other horological objects beyond the wristwatch, but I'm certainly interested in the open seas and, you know, nautical themes, nautical navigation. Probably it is, you know, as I've always said, I've been much more interested in the open seas, in the ocean, compared to aviation and space exploration and moon landing. So Thomas says, are you going to the public days of Watches and Wonders this year, which is going to be Saturday and Sunday? It's coming up, right? Fries says, I will if I am in Geneva. Fries with mayo, as his name indicates, is actually from Belgium, but he works in Geneva. The dates are April 1st and April 2nd. That's a Saturday and a Sunday. Thomas asks, have you bought the ticket yet? Fry says, I have appointments in Brussels. Thomas, are you going to Watches and Wonders? That will be exciting. Yeah, the Chanel Jumping Hour watch was introduced in 2020 by Arnaud Chastain, who I think is still the director of Chanel's watch division. Um, and if I'm not mistaken, it was the first full-fledged um, men's watch that Chanel ever created. And these pieces are not necessarily bargain priced at retail. As far as I know, they should be around mid 30s probably at the point of retail. So let's take a look. But I know that on the secondary market, once every so often you can find interesting deals. Oh no, it's 40,000 and up. Right. Right. For example, the beige gold, which is kind of proprietary Chanel alloy with this opaline dial. It's actually 41,900. And the website indicates the case size as 40 millimeters, but I've tried this watch on and it wears more like a 42 than 40. So I don't know. And you can see how it looks on this gentleman's wrist. So it's a rather big piece. And they have a lot of different limited editions that that combine various dial patterns and matching metals as well. Oh, nice. Thomas is going. He already has a ticket. So this is apparently the blue edition, but it's not down. Yeah, that's this sort of Grenet navy dial matched with a white gold case. Interestingly, or maybe it should be unsurprising, they don't really display the movement on Chanel's website. It's not something they pay a lot of attention to, which is disappointing, but not entirely unexpected. I came across a pretty interesting version of it, um, which is the marble edition. It has like a slice of marble on the dial on Chrono 24, which I found very impressive, and it was in unworn condition and priced right under $30,000. This is very interesting, I think, in terms of how it integrates that slice of marble into the dial. And it is a single slice where you see the striations and patterns in a continuous way. in all these different levels and subdials, which is quite impressive in terms of the work. And you also have in the marble edition, you basically have ceramic mid case in a steel frame. Or maybe is it, I think it's the other way around. I think it's steel covered with ceramic. But overall, the watch has a largely blacked out look with some distinctive flair that emerges in large part from the white strains on the black marble. I think, again, this is the kind of watch, if it's up your alley, that you can find a great deal on the secondary market, but not necessarily something you would run to get at the point of retail. Chopard, as you know, is one of my favorite brands, Thomas. So you are indeed preaching to the choir there. And I love the quadrant jump hour, which was something they introduced a couple of years ago for the 25th anniversary, if I'm not mistaken, for the manufacturer, the LUC manufacturer that Carl Friedrich Schäufele established, as you know, in Fleurier specifically. There we go. Yeah, this is an amazing piece. Grand Feu enamel dial. The numbers are also painted in enamel in navy, including the railroad track for the minutes. That is a gold dial, by the way. So you can see it preserves that gold lining, framing, I should say, for the jump hour itself, which of course is moved to 6 o'clock, so it doesn't get blocked at the moment it jumps, right when you are at the top of the hour. And of course, it has a Geneva seal movement with not one, not two, but 4 barrels. This one is a little more wearable, I think, because it's actually in a 40mm case. 8 days of power reserve, which is an incredible capacity for a jumping hour watch. It's a hand-wound movement, yeah, with, again, 8-day power reserve that carries the hallmark of Geneva. Which you can see, by the way, on the back. There's a power reserve indicator mounted on the bridge of the movement. The Geneva hallmark on the case, which is an 18-karat pink gold. Geneva hallmark on the movement. And the piece is 46,100, one of 100 pieces. Looks good. Really nice. Okay. Let's see. Thomas says, can you recommend any other places to visit while I'm there in Geneva? I won't be there too long, but I might get a chance to visit a couple of shops. You recommend the beautiful watch store. I think you should visit the Davidoff brothers. They will have a lot of vintage watches for you. As you know, they are Speedmaster specialists, but they also have much more. Let me pull up their current inventory. Hi, Mike David. Nice to see you, man. As you see, you know, they have one of the original versions of the Beast. Well, not quite the very first reference, but close enough, from a few years later on on the leather strap rather than the full bracelet. They have an UTM chronograph, a Royal Oak Perpetual Calendar 25686 in steel with an Yves Klein dial that has turned into this tropical purple, which is very fascinating. Tank basculant, the tank with the reversible case. As you can see. Yeah, they always have a very interesting selection. They have a Breguet Tourbillon, a skeletonized Audemars Piguet perpetual calendar in platinum, in that stepped bezel round case that was designed by Jacqueline Demier. DB12 RT in rose gold, a Gégé Lecoutre Memovox, a Mate Tissot exotic dial, 3-register chronograph that has turned into this tropical shade of mocha brown. Yeah, of course, variations on the theme. The Speedmaster galore. Speedmaster Moon Phase with the Aventurine dial from a couple of years ago. Nice assortment of Rolex day dates and date justs. Couple of Daytonas for good measure. Explorers. It goes on. Anyway, they're very nice people. Again, always have a very nice inventory. Lots of Omegas, as you can see. Seamaster 300 with the Lollipop seconds hands, for example. The Fuerza Area del Peru. The FAP worthy Lollipop Thin Arrow Seamaster 300. Fries recommends Atelier du Bracelet de Genève, handmade straps. They are Parisian by origin, right? They have a branch in Geneva as well. Close to Hotel Beau Rivage and the little store of... Okay, right. I'm glad. Look, I mean, Fries. Fries is my brother from another mother. You see, we have a... we have similar taste. And Watchfinder has a store on Rue de Rive. Nice. This is now a sad part of the night because I'm out of my scotch. This is going to be painful. Maybe I should... Should I go for another hour, guys? Should I? Would any one of you like to jump on and help me go for another hour or so? Or should I just end it for tonight? If Thomas jumps on, I'll talk about predictions and expectations from Watches and Wonders, maybe, with him. That could be a nice topic. Oof. This is an incredible blue snowflake. Wow. MN78 supplied to the Marine Nationale. Very nice. Apparently that one is already sold out, or so it seems. Another one, there's a Tudor sub hybrid because it has the snowflake hands but the round index markers. This is a reference 94010 with a black matte dial. Apparently this is a US Navy issued for the Naval Civil Engineering Laboratory. Okay. Cool. Nice. These are very cool pieces too. This is one of the Tudor submariners that was gifted to the Swiss water polo champions in 1974. One example of this is presented in A Man and His Watch, famously Matt Hranek's book. And apparently they have an example of it. The Davidoff brothers from 1974, and it's still in stock for $12,500. A Tudor Submariner, Black Snowflake, reference 7016. Very cool. They have a Zenith El Primero reference A386 Mark III from roughly 1971 with those tricolor sub-registers. Big eye, very oversized. Quite a lovely mix of colors on the dial. I really like these vintage El Primeros as well. As much as I can't hang with the date window between 4 and 5 o'clock, they still look great. Of course, it has that characteristic ladder bracelet that's made by Gefreer, as with a lot of the iconic bracelets of the time. Yeah, with my hairy arms, those ladder bracelets are no, but hey, whatever works for you. And the prices are a little salty, but they are based in Geneva. I can't even imagine the overhead of running a business in Geneva, much less a watch store. Yeah, I love these 5-digit Zenith Daytonas. This is an early 90s example, 1991 specifically. Nice, healthy case. Rolex version of Zenith El Primero caliber 400, namely the caliber 4030. Or screw down pushers. The case and the bracelet I've certainly seen polish, but not to an extent where it's irrecognizable. Looks still to be in decent condition. Well, very good condition, I should say, honestly. They have an inverted 6-piece from 94. Again, same reference point, same reference number, with the Rolex caliber 4030. Jake Brooks, 16520. Panda. Thomas says $4.99. Call it a night, my friend. You're out of scotch. I'm afraid I can't join you. It's 7 a.m. and I need to go to sleep. Thank you for the great show. Hey, maybe it is time for a breakfast. Fry says, okay, I will go for, it's I've gone for 2 hours and 49 minutes. I'll go for another 11. And this can give a chance to maybe another super chat if someone wants to, squeeze it in there with a question, a watch related question, or any question for that matter. I like this. This piece has, of course, it is something that's not really coming back. The wood dials for Rolex pieces that you especially see on day dates of a certain vintage, they're not coming back anytime soon. This one has the vibe of some of the stone dial pieces that sometimes even forego entirely the index markers and leave this beautiful negative space on the dial so that you can make the best out of that natural grain and texture of the material. And this is certainly the case here as well. As you can see, the indices are abbreviated, so you can get the best out of this burlwood dial on the 18038 Rolex day dates, on the President bracelets, and a burlwood dial. What do I think of the Tiffany Nike? I think, look, I mean, it's what can I say? I think it looks cool. I have mentioned this before. I like the Tiffany blue anywhere except on the dial of a watch. I feel like it's not the most attractive color, honestly, on a watch dial. For something that I will interact with so many times during the day, I feel it's a little too light of a color for me. I like lighter shades of blue, but that's too much of a teal slash duck egg slash green kind of shade of blue for me. So I don't know, but as an accent, which it is on those pieces, um, I kind of like it. Let's pull it up. It still hasn't released officially, I think, but for what it is, I like it. And look, I mean, I have to be honest, it does fit with the Tiffany ethos these days, because Tiffany once upon a time was a very exclusive brand, right? That hence the plot of that movie, Breakfast at Tiffany's, right? Which, if I'm not mistaken, was adaptation of a Truman Capote novel. But yeah, I mean, in the 50s and 60s, this was a very exclusive store that if you didn't have the resources, all you could do was to, lust after and aspire towards items through the window case. But even before, well, long before their acquisition by LVMH, Tiffany perfected the art of providing an accessible range of products that will uh, give you part of the blue bag experience, and all manner of silver trinkets and similar items. So I think LVMH has taken that aspect, that signature color, and started applying it anywhere and everywhere through very successful collaborations too. And as much as I don't usually like what comes out of those collaborations, I can't hate it either. I think this particular pair of shoes actually looks great, with since they're largely black, with just Tiffany blue accents. I think they look quite wearable, actually, with that silver detail on the back too, just to put it an extra, Tiffany touch. Yeah, and I like Air Force Ones. I mean, they're a classic. I honestly, I like them better than a lot of Jordans. I know I'm not making any friends probably by saying that, but I really do. And I mean, look at this packaging. It looks incredible, honestly. I don't know. Maybe I'm easily impressed, but a black pair of Air Force Ones with Tiffany blue accents looks pretty sexy to me. But of course, they have to completely uh, take advantage and introduce a whole range of silly um, little items and trinkets. Shoe horn, shoe brush, whistle, and debris. It's it's a strange world we live in, but hey, if it's just going to be a Tiffany blue swoosh, kind of like it. What can I say? The thing is, I think it's going to be very exclusive in the sense that um, it's going to be on Nike's sneakers app on March 3rd, if I'm not mistaken, and some Nike stores. Um, and I think you can order it online or something, but you can only. What does it say? It says on March 3rd, for a limited time, clients may enroll online for an opportunity to purchase. Starting March 6th, clients will be notified regarding their enrollment outcome and if their order is confirmed or not. On March 7, confirmed delivery orders will start to process. Okay, so you can buy it from the website. And confirmed pickup orders will be available at 2 Tiffany & Co. locations in New York City. I think the price was a little expensive, but not outrageous. I think it's like going to be $400 or something. Yeah. Yeah. So the enrollment link will be shared via Tiffany digital channels on March 3rd, starting 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Enrollment will be open for a limited time. Once it's closed, clients will not be able to modify or cancel. Clients require a valid U.S. shipping and billing address to enroll and may enroll only once. Clients will have the choice to enroll either home delivery, Soho store pickup, or flagship next door store pickup. Wow. Enrolling is free, but clients must provide payment information at no charge. Clients will only be charged if their order is confirmed on March 6th. Enrollment does not ensure the opportunity to purchase or the confirmation of an order. All right. Well, that's the process. Yeah. All right. Last gasp. I am closing for tonight. Please hit the like button on the way out. I do appreciate you all. Thank you for your support and presence, especially those of you, Jake Brooks, Thomas Burnett, who super chatted actually twice, Nick Butter, and Basil's Bezels. I appreciate you all. Um, It was great to be with you. I'm a little tired tonight in either case, so it's probably for the better that I close a little early. I'll be with you tomorrow as well. Maybe I can even do an early show too if I feel inspired. Let's see. I'll think about it. But I appreciate you. Thank you for being here. Hit the like button and don't forget to tune in tomorrow as well, where we will talk about watches yet again. Take care, guys. Bye.